It's a line that trips people up. You might have said it 100 times without really thinking about it. It's tucked right there in the middle of the Apostles' Creed, one of the oldest statements of Christian faith. He suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried. We're with it so far. That's the story we know. Then comes the next part. He descended into hell. Wait, what? Jesus went to hell. The hell with fire and suffering. The place of eternal punishment. Why would he do that? Did he have more suffering to endure? Did he need to be punished? The thought is jarring. It feels wrong. It seems to contradict everything else we know about Jesus being the perfect, sinless Son of God. For many, the single line is so confusing or troubling that they just mumble through it or skip it altogether. Some churches have even removed it from their version of the creed, and the confusion is understandable. The problem starts with our modern understanding of the word hell. When we hear it, we immediately picture one thing: the lake of fire, the place of final judgment for the wicked. But the Bible and the ancient people who wrote the creed had a much broader and more nuanced understanding of the world beyond the grave. To get to the bottom of this, we have to do more than just look at a single English word. We need to go back to the original languages and the worldview of the people who told these stories. We need to understand what they meant when they talked about the place of the dead. The core of the issue is a translation problem. The English word hell has become a catch-all for several different words in the original Hebrew and Greek scriptures. These words don't all mean the same thing, not even close. Let's start with the Old Testament. The word the ancient Hebrews used for the place of the dead was Sheol. Sheol wasn't necessarily a place of punishment or fire. It was simply the realm of the dead. It was where everyone righteous and unrighteous went when they died. It was seen as a shadowy, quiet place beneath the earth, a place of waiting. When the patriarch Jacob thought his son Joseph had been killed, he cried out in grief, "I will go down to Sheol to my son," mourning. He wasn't saying he was going to a place of eternal torment. He was saying he wanted to die and be with his son in the common grave of all humanity. To think of Sheol as the great equalizer. No matter who you were in life, king or servant, you ended up in Sheol. It was the destination for the soul after it separated from the body. Now, let's move to the New Testament, which was written in Greek. The Greek word that most closely matches the Hebrew Sheol is Hades. In Greek mythology, Hades was the underworld, ruled by the god of the same name. But when Jewish and Christian writers used the word Hades, they were using it as a direct translation for Sheol. It meant the same thing: the realm of the dead, the waiting place for souls. This is where it gets interesting. The New Testament gives us a slightly clearer picture of Hades than the Old Testament gave us of Sheol. The most famous glimpse comes from a story Jesus told in the Gospel of Luke. It's the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. When both men die, they both go to Hades, but they have very different experiences there. The poor righteous Lazarus is carried to a place of comfort called Abraham's bosom. The selfish, wicked rich man is sent to a place of torment and fire within Hades. They are in the same general realm, but they are separated by a great chasm and are having opposite experiences. This story shows us that the New Testament concept of Hades was a place with two distinct sections, one for the righteous dead who were waiting for the Messiah's final victory, and one for the unrighteous dead who were awaiting judgment. So Hades wasn't just one uniform place. It was the holding place for all souls, but it was divided. There is another, more familiar Greek word in the New Testament that gets translated as hell. That word is Gehenna. And this is the word that lines up with our modern fiery image of hell. Gehenna was a real place outside Jerusalem. It was the Valley of Hinnom, which had a dark history. In Old Testament times, some Israelites had sacrificed their children to false gods there. Later, it became the city's garbage dump. Fires were kept constantly burning to consume the waste and the carcasses of animals and criminals. It was a place of filth, fire, and unending smoke. When Jesus wanted to describe the place of final, eternal punishment, he used the most graphic and horrifying image his listeners could imagine: Gehenna. He spoke of the fire of Gehenna, where the worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. This is the hell of final judgment. This is the lake of fire. So we have Hades, the realm of the dead, and Gehenna, the place of eternal punishment. The word used in the earliest Greek versions of the Apostles' Creed for hell is a form of the word Hades. The original Latin versions use the word inferos or inferna, which means the lower regions or the underworld, a direct parallel to Hades and Sheol. The Creed is not saying that Jesus descended into Gehenna. It is saying he descended into Hades. He went to the realm of the dead. This is the most important distinction to make. Jesus did not go to the place of eternal punishment to be tormented. He went to the place where all human souls at that time went after death. He fully died. His body was in the tomb, and his human soul went to the place of the dead, just like everyone else. That is the first and most crucial part of understanding this line in the Creed. He wasn't being punished. He was completing the human experience of death. But the Bible gives us more than just a definition of terms. There are specific passages that support this idea of a descent. The clearest one is in the book of Acts, during Peter's first sermon on the day of Pentecost. Peter is explaining the resurrection to a crowd of confused Jews. To prove his point, he quotes from Psalm 16, a psalm written by King David. Peter says that David was a prophet and was speaking about the Messiah, Jesus. He quotes the psalm, "For you will not abandon my soul to Hades, or let your Holy One see corruption." Peter then explains what this means. He says David died and was buried, and his tomb is still here. His body saw corruption, his soul went to Hades and stayed there. But this prophecy wasn't ultimately about David. It was about Jesus. Peter's whole point is that Jesus' soul was not abandoned to Hades, and his body did not see corruption in the grave. The key part of that sentence is the implication that his soul was, for a time, in Hades. In order to not be abandoned there, you first have to be there. Peter is explicitly stating that between his death on the cross and his resurrection, Jesus' soul was in Hades, the realm of the dead. But God did not leave him there. God raised him up, body and soul, victorious over death. This is the primary biblical anchor for the Creed statement. Another passage, and probably the most mysterious one, is in Peter's first letter. He writes that Christ was put to death in the flesh but made alive in the spirit, in which he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison, who formerly did not obey, when God's patience waited in the days of Noah while the ark was being prepared. This verse has been debated for centuries. What on earth does it mean? Who are these spirits in prison? When did Jesus proclaim to them? There are a few major interpretations. One view is that after his death, Jesus' soul descended to Hades and made a proclamation to the souls of the people who died in Noah's flood. He wasn't offering them a second chance at salvation. It was too late for that. Instead, he was proclaiming his victory. He was announcing that God's plan of redemption, which started way back in Genesis, was now complete. He had conquered sin and death, the very forces that had led to their destruction. He was showing them, and all of the unrighteous dead, that he was now Lord over all, even Lord over the realm of the dead. Another interpretation suggests the spirits in prison were not human souls but fallen angels, the ones mentioned in Genesis and other Jewish texts who caused so much wickedness in Noah's day. In this view, Jesus descended to their place of imprisonment, sometimes associated with another Greek word, Tartarus, and declared his ultimate authority over them. He was rubbing his victory in the face of the demonic forces that thought they had won when he was on the cross. A third view, held by some like the early church father Augustine, is that this passage isn't about a descent after death at all. Instead, it suggests that the pre-incarnate Christ, in his spirit, was preaching through Noah to the disobedient people of that generation. While this is a possible interpretation of the grammar, the more traditional understanding for centuries has been that it refers to an event that took place between Jesus' death and resurrection. We don't have to have a definitive answer on the exact identity of the spirits or the precise content of the message. The main point from this passage is that something significant happened in the spiritual realm during that time. And Jesus wasn't just passively waiting in the grave. He was active. He was on a mission. He went to the realm of the dead and made a powerful proclamation of his victory. There's one more key passage, this one from Paul's letter to the Ephesians. So Paul writes about the gifts Christ gave to the church after his victory. He quotes from Psalm 68 saying, "When he ascended on high, he led a host of captives, and he gave gifts to men." Paul then adds his own commentary. In saying, he ascended, what does it mean but that he had also descended into the lower parts of the earth? He who descended is the one who also ascended far above all the heavens, that he might fill all things. What are the lower parts of the earth? Some think this just means Jesus came down to the earth itself during his incarnation. He came from heaven above to the earth below, but many theologians, both ancient and modern, believe this is a direct reference to his descent into Hades. Just as Sheol was seen as being down or beneath the earth, Paul is saying that Christ descended to the very depths before he ascended to the very heights. The one who went down to the realm of the dead is the same one who now sits at the right hand of the Father. His journey covers the entire cosmos, from the lowest depths to the highest heaven. He has conquered and filled every realm. This also connects to the idea of leading a host of captives. A powerful and beautiful tradition in the church is that when Jesus descended to Hades, he didn't just proclaim victory to the unrighteous dead. He went to the other side of Hades, to Abraham's bosom, where the righteous souls like Abraham, Moses, David, and John the Baptist were waiting. He went there to set them free. Before Jesus' death and resurrection, the way into the full presence of God was not yet open. These Old Testament saints had died in faith, but they were waiting for the promised Messiah to complete his work. Our Jesus' descent was a rescue mission. He broke down the gates of Hades, not to let sinners out, but to lead the righteous saints into heaven. He harrowed hell, as the old language puts it. He plundered the realm of death and led its righteous captives into the glory of his Father's presence. When he ascended, he took them with him. This helps make sense of something Jesus said on the cross. The thief next to him says, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus replies, "Truly, I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." At first, this seems to contradict the idea of a descent. If Jesus was going to Hades, how could he and the thief be in paradise? But if we understand that paradise was the name for the good part of Hades, Abraham's bosom, it makes perfect sense. Jesus was telling the thief that on that very day his suffering would be over and his soul would be with Jesus' soul in a place of comfort and peace, waiting for the resurrection. They were both going to the same place, the waiting realm of the dead, but to the blessed side of it. So we've established what hell means in the Creed. It means Hades, the realm of the dead. And we've seen the biblical passages that support the idea that Jesus' soul went there. But this raises the biggest question of all: why? What is the theological significance of this thing? Why is it so important that it earned a place in this foundational creed? The answer to this is where the real power of this doctrine lies. It's not just a piece of biblical trivia, it's central to what Christ accomplished. First, the descent into hell affirms the reality and fullness of his death. Jesus didn't just appear to die. He didn't just faint on the cross and get revived later in the cool of the tomb, as some skeptics have suggested. He truly and fully died, and death for a human being is not just the stopping of a heart. It is the separation of the soul from the body. For his death to be a real human death, his body had to go to the grave, and his soul had to go where human souls went. By descending to Hades, Jesus fully identified with us in our most ultimate state of weakness and mortality. He drank the cup of human experience to its very dregs, including the experience of death itself. This wasn't a play, it was real. His death was as real as ours will be. Second, it proclaims the totality of his victory. Jesus' victory wasn't just a victory for people who are alive. It was a victory over every domain, including the domain of death itself. Satan and the forces of darkness thought they had won when Jesus' body lay in the tomb. They thought they had finally silenced the Son of God, but they were wrong. Even in death, Jesus was the conqueror. He invaded the very stronghold of death, the place Satan held power, and declared his lordship there. He broke down its gates from the inside. The early church had this powerful image of Jesus storming the gates of Hades, with light flooding into the darkness, demons scattering in terror, and the souls of the righteous reaching out to their liberator. He didn't go to Hades as a victim, he went as a king, a triumphant warrior. As the book of Hebrews says, he shared in our humanity so that through death he might destroy the one who has the power of death, that is, the devil, and deliver all those who through fear of death were subject to lifelong slavery. His descent was the moment he served the final eviction notice to the ruler of that realm. Third, it provides profound comfort and hope for us. Because Jesus descended to the realm of the dead, there is no place we can go, not even death itself, where he has not been before us and conquered. His presence fills all things, from the heights of heaven to the depths of Sheol. The psalmist wrote, "If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there." Jesus made that poetry a reality. He has walked through the valley of the shadow of death so that we do not have to fear it. He has transformed it. For the believer, death is no longer a descent into a shadowy, uncertain waiting place. Because he led the captives free and ascended into heaven, the way is now open for us. When we die, we do not go to Hades, we go to be with the Lord. Paul was confident that to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. The descent and resurrection changed the very nature of death for those who trust in him. The gate of Hades has been replaced by the gate of heaven. The history of how this line got into the creed is also revealing. The Apostles' Creed wasn't written by a committee in one sitting. It grew and developed over the first few centuries of the Church as a summary of core apostolic teaching, often in response to heresies. The line "he descended into hell" was one of the later additions, becoming standard in the Western Church around the 4th and 5th centuries. Why was it added then? Many scholars believe it was to combat a specific heresy called Apollinarianism. Apollinarians taught that Jesus had a human body and a human animal soul, but that his mind and spirit were the divine Logos. In other words, he wasn't fully human. He had a human shell, but a divine computer for a brain. The church knew this was wrong. The Bible teaches that Jesus was fully God and fully man. To save humanity, he had to be one of us in every essential way. By adding the line "he descended into hell," the church was making a powerful statement. They were saying that Jesus had a real human soul spirit, the kind of soul that separates from the body at death and goes to the realm of the dead. It was a way of defending the full and complete humanity of Christ. He wasn't a divine being merely pretending to be human. He was so fully human that his soul experienced death just as ours would. Of course, not everyone has agreed on the exact meaning. John Calvin, one of the great Protestant reformers, had a unique take. He believed the descent into hell wasn't about a literal journey to Hades after his death. Instead, he saw it as a powerful metaphor for the unimaginable spiritual suffering Jesus endured on the cross. For Calvin, hell represented the full weight of God's wrath against sin, which Jesus, in his soul, experienced in our place as he hung there, crying out, my, why have you forsaken me?" In this view, the descent is not a location, but a spiritual experience of abandonment and judgment that was central to the atonement. While this is a minority view in the history of the Church, it highlights the profound spiritual reality that the Creed is pointing to, whether you take it as a literal journey or a metaphorical description of his suffering on the cross. But the traditional view remains the most common, and for many, the most compelling. It completes the story of Christ's work. The gospel narrative is a story of descent and ascent. He descended from heaven in his incarnation. He descended further in his humiliation and suffering. He descended to the lowest point possible, death and the grave. He descended even into the realm of the dead, Hades itself. And from that lowest possible point, he began his triumphant ascent. He rose from the dead. He ascended into heaven, and he now sits at the right hand of God the Father, filling all things with his power and presence. The descent into hell is the turning point of that entire story. It is the lowest point from which the glorious comeback begins. So did Jesus really go to hell? If by hell you mean Gehenna, the eternal lake of fire, the place of punishment for the damned, then the answer is an emphatic no. He did not go there to be punished. His suffering for our sins was finished on the cross. But if by hell you mean what the Creed's authors meant, Sheol, Hades, the common realm of the dead, where all souls went before his victory was complete, then the answer is yes. He went there not as a condemned sinner, but as a conquering king. He went to declare his victory over sin, death, and Satan. And he went to confirm the reality of his own death, and thus the power of his resurrection. He went to lead the righteous dead into the presence of God, opening a way for all who would follow. He went to show that there is no corner of creation, no dark valley, no deep pit that is outside the reach of his light and his lordship. The line he descended into hell is not a strange or embarrassing detail in the Christian story. It is a declaration of the scope of his power. It tells us that our Savior's work was not partial. He didn't just save our souls for a future heaven. He invaded and redeemed every part of the human experience, even the finality of death itself. It is a statement of ultimate hope. It means that the worst thing that can happen to us, death, has been defanged. The king of that dark country has been overthrown by a better king. The final enemy has been defeated from the inside out.